Today I'm talking with Kaitlyn Schneider of Easton West. We met at an event last month and I was so blown away by her branding, her packaging, and the product. And I think at the time they had just launched like 3 months beforehand. So it was really, really impressive what she's built in such a short amount of time. And we also instantly bonded over the fact that we're both engineers. So, Kaitlyn is the founder of Easton West, a prestige skincare brand rooted in science and built around a patent pending hero product designed to target chronic inflammation, which she says is the root cause of visible and invisible aging. And I am so fascinated by this topic and I can't wait to learn more. So, let's get into it.
For having me.
Oh, thank you for being here. I'm so excited. Before Easton West, what were you doing?
Yeah, before East and West, I started my career in a more traditional, I know you're familiar with sort of traditional engineering pathways. I worked as a biological engineer and I really loved the sort of science systems, which we'll talk about in a minute, aspect of it, but I really missed that sort of human day-to-day interaction that like consumer goods and personal care products, et cetera, have. So before skincare, I was a traditional engineer but was able to pivot and sort of use that systems thinking, that root cause analysis to create something new in the skincare world.
What drove you to get into engineering in the first place?
Like most engineers, I grew up loving to take things apart, see how they work, how things are ticking, but always like to put them back together, maybe a little bit better than they started, trying not to be totally destructive as a child. But, it was always more than just the math and science. Of course, passion for math and science is always that root of engineering, but it was really the innovation and the creation of something new that was so exciting to me. Whether you're doing research in school or seeing new tech getting built, especially today where it seems like there's something like cutting edge and new every single day. I always wanted to be on the forefront of like, let me know. I want to know what's happening and I want to be a part of what's happening next, today.
Yeah. Yeah, I found that one thing I struggled with when I was working in engineering is that you're kind of in the small piece of a very large project that takes many years, if not decades. And it was hard to like really become passionate about something when I'm just sort of a cog in the machine versus like seeing something go from start to finish in a quick amount of time.
I totally relate to that. I used to work in, undergrad research in like true lab setting full time. And what was always so exciting was exactly that, like the cutting edge, the what's new piece of it. But then you'd look at like the plan for the research project, it would be like 10, 20 years from now. And I'm like, I need people to use it now. What are we doing today?
Yeah, totally agree. So, what first sparked your idea to start something yourself?
Yeah, so I worked for Tata Harper as you mentioned beforehand and had such a great experience really getting into the weeds of, what does it mean to develop a product? What does it mean to be a brand? And like, any entrepreneur, of course, that gets the cogs turning and you just always have your kind of own vision that you want to bring to life. And so she created this really great foundation in what it means to be clean, green, like really good for you beauty. But as an engineer, again, this idea of root cause was always with me. And this is true of most of the beauty industry. It's not that there's no skincare out there, but if we have these really great ingredients and we know what the problem is, I didn't need to interview hundreds of women to know that like wrinkles are a challenge, right? We know this. We know the problem is, we have solutions. Like, what's the gap? Why is skincare not solved and we're sitting here talking about something else? And so really the spark for me was this sort of, as I said, like human component. We talked to hundreds of women before we started formulating it all to say, what are the challenges? What's stopping you from having the skin of your dreams? And never was the answer, if I had enough peptides, my problems would be solved, right? It was always things like, I don't even know what a serum is. Am I supposed to be using a 10-step routine? How do I put a routine together? The products I used to use aren't working like they used to. Should I be using what my daughter's using? You get it. These probably sound familiar. So that was the lightning bolt or the lightning bolt moment of, oh, it's not just problem solution. It's actually like the delivery system of how we get there. It's the process, right? So I always say the three keys to good skincare are ingredients, which we have a major focus on, most of the industry does. But where you really get your perfect skin is from regular application and proper application. And that's really where part of the challenge that we wanted to solve with this really tight routine. So that human interaction, this real idea of meeting people where they are and not just solving the problem of, skin as an independent body, but like the people who are actually using it. How do we make this usable for them?
I think that's an amazing thought to have. How did this go from just an interesting idea to I'm actually doing this?
Yeah. So, it's 2026 now, crazy. But there's a lot of skincare out there, right? So I didn't want to just be another speed to market brand that had cute packaging, but did what everybody else did. So we really spent the time going, okay, we know that part of the problem is this application regular use issue. So then we dug into that even deeper and thought, okay, if just creating a routine is part of the challenge, how do we solve that? Clearly it's got to be a tight routine. Our entire cutting edge solve all your problems routine, only 3 steps. But then the other side of it was, okay, if we're only going to have 3 steps, but we're going to make meaningful change, how do we do that, right? How do we have maximalist results in a minimalist routine? And so this was the second lightning bolt that really sparked, okay, we've got to make a brand out of this, which was root cause. So not just asking, do you have wrinkles? Is your skin dry? But, if you've ever been part of the 5 why process, you'll know where I'm going. It's like, why do you have wrinkles? What is functionally happening that's giving you dry skin? What is the underlying issue that's giving you, redness or irritation? And it was really fun to do that exercise because it actually really always funneled down to the same thing. And so it was exciting to say, like, oh my gosh, why is this not common knowledge? Why is this not common practice? It always leads back to inflammation, this chronic inflammation in the skin. And if you attack that, you can really truly have this like powerful, meaningful change in that small routine. So with this root cause analysis, we were able to say, yes, we can actually address the problem of having a small routine that's easy to follow while also giving you all the results you'd expect from a much larger routine.
Cool. So I always say that, and this might be different for you. In my case, I went from systems engineering to building a jewelry brand. And I always say that the Venn diagram of skills between being a systems engineer and being the founder of a jewelry brand don't even overlap. It takes two totally different skill sets. I'm curious if you feel the same.
It's so funny because I would agree from a skill set perspective, there's little overlap, but from a mentality perspective, that's where I see it's like the Venn diagram is a circle, right? I think you could probably relate to one of the biggest things you learn in engineering school is just how to think, like this idea of creative problem solving, which yes, one day you might be in like differential equations and doing like a 5-page math problem. It's clearly a difference than formulating or doing brand development, but it rewires your brain from a how do you approach a problem perspective. And like, I think you can probably relate too to being an entrepreneur, starting a brand, every single day you're trying to preemptively plan for challenges. And every single day there's a challenge that you could not possibly have planned for. So I think it gave me the ability to approach problems with a creative mindset, which is really where I see the foundation of engineering beyond just, math and science.
Yeah, that's great. I also want to ask because I feel like for a lot of people, getting a job at Tata Harper, if you're a beauty lover and you like science and biology, sounds like a dream position. How scary was it for you to take that leap to founding something on your own?
Absolutely. This is like one of my favorite things to talk about because I'm a big dreamer, I always like to say I'm like an engineer with the soul of an artist. But what I mean by that is, when I started my career and I was working in sort of the traditional engineering path, yes, I was using more of my directly translated from school to work skills, but I was really missing that passion of that drives people to create something new. And so when I started working at Tata, that absolutely was the dream. I grew up in the early 2000s. Like, I credit The Devil Wears Prada and, Project Runway with my as much inspiration as my taking things apart and putting them back together. And so I think fighting the challenge of like, how will I even break into this with, if it's only going to be one in a million people, why not me? Was a big challenge. But even just getting that first job in the beauty industry, being able to break into this really competitive, crazy industry was that initial spark of like, okay, we can do hard things.
Yeah.
And then beyond that, and again, I'm sure you relate, it just becomes a matter of, is it harder to not pursue this thing that's like constantly in the back of your mind, or is it harder to pursue it? And neither one is easy. Let me always be clear about this. It's absolutely challenging. I don't think anybody wakes up one day and says, I think I'm gonna start a business. And then there it is. But it's harder to not do it, right? And to like constantly tamp down that little voice in your mind.
I want to ask you a little bit about the branding and the ethos of the brand, and if any of your time at Tata Harper influenced that. But one of the most striking things about your products is the packaging and the design, and you're really world building. I want to know how you did that. Did you do all of that yourself? Were you inspired by your previous job? It's really impressive.
No, I really appreciate that. And, your world of jewelry was such an inspiration for me. Again, I always reference back to the ladies that I talked to, but they were such a point of inspiration. And so, you know, again, launching a new brand and having the background at such a great, prestigious brand like Tata Harper, the baseline was obviously we're going to have killer formulas. Like, there was no world where I was going to launch without clinically tested, safe for you, effective formulas. And that's where we spend a ton of time, obviously. But beyond that, I was like, skincare should be fun. God forbid, right? And that can sound trite, but I actually see it as an extension of the engineering process itself from the perspective of, a beautiful object, you approach that completely differently in your day-to-day life than something that feels purely functional. So, for example, with our products, I really wanted them to match the environment of the women that were using them. And these women are so creative, they're so bold, they had so many cool stories to tell, they travel, they're so creative, they're great cooks, a lot of them. But then I looked at their products and it just was like such a disconnect from who they are to what the products they're using, and that wasn't true of their daughters, right? If you go to any big beauty retailer, the popularity of lip gloss right now or lip balms is not due solely to the fact that we all have dry lips. Nobody has a collection of 30 lip masks because their lips are that dry. And so I knew it was a really important element, but products that are really beautiful that can sit out on your counter, the ones that you see every day, are the ones that you're actually going to use. And that helps bridge the gap of daily use and regular use. Something that when you have company over and you're like cleaning up and you're putting things in the back of your medicine cabinet, how often has something gone to die there and 6 months later you're clearing out the cabinet and you're like, oh, I think I really liked this 6 months ago. Doesn't matter what ingredients are in that bottle, they didn't make a difference for you in the past 6 months. And so joy of skincare meets actual functionality really came into play when it came to doing what I hoped was a beautiful design.
Yeah. And do you have any of your packaging nearby? Because I would love for you to just like hold it up so
I
people can.
sure do.
Wow. Like it's
So our three
so chic, gorgeous.
yeah, our three products are our cleanser here. So you can see it was really inspired by sort of classic jewelry, this sort of asymmetrical shape, but also something that's like ergonomically easy to open and close. You can get
Yeah.
your hands around. It's not challenging to open. Our mist, which you can see is a fun little biphase, really inspired by actually, I have an aunt who she always had this. She's a flight attendant, and she would always tell me these stories where she'd be traveling and she'd buy some like beautiful bottle with some perfume that smelled terrible. She's been wearing the same perfume for like A long time, I'll say. And she would buy these beautiful bottles, dump out the perfume when she got home, and refill it with the same fragrance. So I was really inspired by that when I was like, let's feature the product. Let's make it something that you're excited to keep on your counter.
Yeah.
And then last but not least is our signature ceram. So again, something that's cute, inspired by jewelry, something that like even when it's empty, it could sit out and be a part of your sort of daily landscape.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. I'm also so curious because um you mentioned the women that you spoke to kind of build the brand, and you also mentioned the bottles being ergonomically easier to open, which I think is so smart and probably something that like no one else thinks about. Were you building with a certain age or demographic in mind, or is this really for everyone?
Yeah, so our root cause analysis of inflammation in the skin is a universal challenge, but my heart is always really with this demographic of women over 50. And the reason behind that is I'm an only child, so I always grew up around like my mom, my aunt, their friends, etc. These women that were always, they always have a great story. You kind of start over here and you land over here. And it was always something new. And these ladies developed style, interiors, all these things before Pinterest, before AI. Oh my gosh. And especially in the past few years, I've seen them really being this like core inspiration for the younger demographics, et cetera. But again, I'd look at their products and I'm like, your options are something you've been using for a million years and it doesn't work for you anymore. The products aren't formulated for you. Or, they kind of have this like ultra clinical aesthetic. Maybe they work, maybe they don't, but it always felt like an afterthought. Again, in a way that like products for their daughters didn't. And frankly, even for myself, I find that I'm aging out of, a lot of skincare brands and I haven't even reached that age yet. And so I really saw it as a twofold effect. A, let's design something for a group of women who are always inspiring us, but maybe aren't getting the sort of return on design. And two, frankly, for sort of future me, like I want a line that I'm excited to age into versus something that I'm like, am I too old for this? Is it working for me? Sort of a feeling.
I love that so much. I love the idea of marketing towards this group of women that has historically been underserved, is often ignored by marketing and media. But also, you're so right. They are so inspiring and fun and creative. And I would love to see more of that in your marketing or like in marketing in general. I'm excited to see that from you guys.
Yeah.
So I want to get into the idea of chronic inflammation and invisible aging because I have never heard this spoken about before. I think it's so fascinating. What is chronic inflammation? What is invisible aging? And what does that mean to us as regular people?
Absolutely. Such a great question and such a layered question. So, when it comes down to it, inflammation itself is not a bad thing. This is part of our immune system. It's something our body does naturally and it protects us. When it starts to turn into something negative is when you get into this idea of chronic inflammation. You can think of it as like your body always being in fight or flight. And why does this happen? Some of it is our lifestyle, some of it is just and it's not our fault, frankly. It's part of it is just like the world we live in. We can have a whole extended podcast on the challenges with processed foods, with our diets, how much time we're spending on screens, the stress of watching the news every day. Even things like, when was the last time you talked to somebody who said that they slept great and they had no concerns with their sleep hygiene, right? Like I can't remember a single conversation that went that way. Although if you're out there, congratulations, please share.
I have a 12-month
um
baby, so not me.
not you. I'll keep the search going.
Yeah.
But it's our lifestyles. And so what chronic inflammation means is it's not these big reactions that you see if you get a cut or, something that's acute. It's that always on challenge, and it can be really, really tough because when it's something that's always on, you don't always feel it, right? It's like a little, death by a thousand cuts kind of an issue. And so, why does this matter to me today? What does this matter to us today? Well, with chronic inflammation, It's something that's cumulative. So you won't necessarily see it today. You might not see it tomorrow, but it's what's leading up to this long term negative impact. And what that means in a more easy to kind of digest way is, some of inflammation is short term. The obvious things that we think about: irritation, we connect with inflammation, puffiness, redness, some of those visible short term things. But over time, we can also tie it to some of those deeper, more challenging to solve problems. So, for example, if your cells are focused on an anti inflammatory pathway, they're not focused on supporting and building their own barrier. Once your barrier breaks down, water retention on the cellular level really falls off the scale. If you don't have good barrier, you can't keep water in. If you're not keeping water in over a prolonged period of time, you get that really deep set dehydration in your skin. Even longer term, if your skin is focused on this anti inflammatory reaction for a long period of time, it's not focused on its normal biological processes like collagen, elastin synthesis. When you stop producing your own elastin over time, that's where you see some of this breakdown of density, you see wrinkle formation, and all of a sudden, years and years and years of chronic inflammation really has a visible effect that can be harder to reverse. I always like to think of it on the cellular level because your cells are really just like mini organisms, right? And just like our day to day, if you've got a task list and on your list is you've got to answer your emails and you've got to cook dinner and you've got to, I'm in New York, commute into work, take the subway, but your emails are blowing up. You're getting thousands of emails. Well, you're probably not going to go home and cook a five-star meal. You're probably going to call DoorDash. You're probably not going to take the subway. You're probably going to call an Uber, right? There's only so many things that your cells and you can focus on in a day. And when chronic inflammation just never leaves the task list, a lot of these other processes that your cells do naturally fall off, and you see this long-term damage.
Is so interesting. So it's not really something an individual can feel, but it's happening. So how does
Exactly.
that invisible aging turn into visible aging, and how do we prevent that?
Absolutely. So I mentioned that inflammation is sort of this root cause of our visible aging, which leads to this idea of invisible aging over time. Now, of course, when you wake up in the morning and you do your skincare routine, long-term processes are all well and good. But if you see a wrinkle today or your skin's dry today, like tomorrow is not a factor, right? We want to solve the issue today. And so that's where our formula theory comes into play, which is we address that underlying issue so that you have long term success, but we also bolster you on a short term, like immediate symptoms level. It's about doing both. My core philosophy is this idea of duality by design. So, really like expecting more out of your products, whether that's, vintage meets modern or, old meets new, science meets art, botanical meets clinical, the list goes on and on. But addressing inflammation is your long-term solve. It's how do you fix this over time? And there's short-term solves, long-term solves built in, but we support those processes throughout. So for example, if we want to solve your problems today, we're going to inject a lot of water into your routine. We have great ingredients like cross-linked hyaluronic acid. They're going to solve those challenges of the day to day so that you can't, it's almost like, so you can stick around for that longer process. And so what you want to do is prevent and repair along the way. Prevention, really, really important. It's always easier to stop a problem before it starts than it is to reverse. But we know with our demo in particular, a lot of them, like, what do you do if damage has already arrived? Maybe you were, a beach, a sun goddess back in the day, and, we weren't using our SPF, and you've already seen the effects of those things. We want to address that too. And so we're addressing this underlying root cause, which is going to give you that long term success while also supporting you with the safety net of like, I want to see results today.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I think something that maybe the general consumer doesn't understand is that a lot of beauty brands are either private labeled products, so it's really just the same formulations but in different packaging, or just kind of remixing of formulations or ingredients that have always been used in skincare. but you actually have your own patent pending hero ingredient called Celvite. That's so cool and so different than most brands out there, especially for a first time founder to really build around a brand new product. So, why did you decide to engineer something totally new instead of just reformulating what already exists?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for asking. This is such a fun topic to cover. So, again, I was armed with this lightning bolt moment of, oh my gosh, I know what the problem is. And realizing that it ties to a similar issue really opened up the world to say like, okay, well, like we can really focus here. This is like a great new opportunity for research. And of course, there's great ingredients on the market. We use a lot of those too. But there was nothing that really locked in on this long-term problem. And if I can zoom out to the larger industry, that's something that was really a challenge. It makes sense why people are focused on this sort of symptomatic level and the like results today. We focus on it too. But that's really where you start to see this issue of like, why is my skin never getting better? I've been using something new, it's making some difference, but it's like year over year, my skin is not improving. And so we invested the time in creating new tech because there was a new problem to solve. And again, it's not enough today to come out and say like, I've got a prettier package for the same thing that you already own, because when it comes down to it, like it's not just a pretty face. A pretty bottle is not enough. And so we did the research to say, like, okay, what are the modalities that are creating or exacerbating this chronic inflammation? Like, why are we able to reach the cells? Why are, when we do have things that are anti-inflammatory, why aren't they working in the long-term sense? So it was really complicated. It was like things like delivery systems, a lot of times molecules are too big, literally too big to enter into your cells. Cells are really small. So our technology is literally nanotech. It's small enough to actually not only penetrate cells on the upper layers, but actually go deeper and reach those lower levels of your dermis. So not only is the top layer glowy, beautiful for today, but when you have the cellular turnover, those under layers are brighter as well. Beyond that, too, again, we're looking at like, what does inflammation functionally do to the cell? It has challenges like it makes your cell more sluggish. It doesn't have as much energy. So re-energizing was a big focus for us. So literally, if we're getting into like the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, right? How do we give your cell more energy? If you have more energy, you're going to get more done in the day. The same is true of your cells. Two is cellular division, cellular turnover. So when your cells are regenerating, turning over, you get glow, right? Cells that are dead or damaged, we want to move past those. We want to get something that's brighter and younger and can function better. And then last but not least was really that like barrier challenge. Like, how do we protect your cells so that damage doesn't even get to them? So it's protective on the cellular level. So lots of different research into like what's actually happening at the cellular level. What is inflammation? What is the impact both on the visible and the invisible level? And how do we develop something that's going to be not just like surface level impact, but really have this long-term benefit at the root cause level. So we developed our own tech. It's nanotech, and it fights at three different levels on the cellular level so that you see this meaningful change. Beyond that, I'm very happy to say, as much time as it took to develop the ingredient itself, it wasn't enough to just take my word for it, right? For us, like clinical testing is an absolute non-negotiable. It's one thing to say, like, I think it's really great. I promise you're going to like it. It's an entirely different thing to say, like, I have hard data. We have multiple layers of clinical data, but most importantly for this ingredient, it's quantitative data. There's no I feels about it. There's nothing, I think it's working. It's numbers-based data that says this is specifically what it's doing at this rate. And I'm very happy to say we had incredible results when we did our gene testing to show that it stimulates your own genes, your own cellular genes, to produce its own growth factor by over 17-fold. So really, really making a meaningful impact. And that ingredient is across our entire portfolio of products. So it's really at the top of everything we do, addressing this underlying issue for long-term success across the board.
That's very, very cool. I'm so curious, like, how long did that R&D process take? What did it look like? How did that what was your life like during that process?
Yeah, it's funny because it throws back to some of those early days of research that we kind of talked about where, in some ways it was a few years, in some ways it was like decades, right? Because you're building on so many different pockets of research, things that people have tried before successfully, non-successfully. So it's all about years of research and collaboration on people who knew a lot about inflammation, years of research on just skin functionality, right? And then beyond that, once we got into, okay, what is this ingredient going to do? The delivery system of how to get it there and make sure it's not too big to do what it needs to do. So we spent over 2 years, but really many other years of research beyond that, just developing this ingredient itself, clinically testing it, etc. And then beyond that, once we had the ingredient, making sure that it worked well and was compatible with our formula. So it didn't break down in formula. It was enough to actually make it to your skin so that once you bought it, it's on shelf, it didn't disintegrate in the bottle. So years and years of formulation research, cellular research, skin research, for, chemistry, all of this good stuff went into just that one ingredient. But to give some context too, because I know it's hard sometimes, like you mentioned, white labeling is really, really common in beauty, where you might get a really nice formula and you kind of squint and add like sometimes 0.00001% of an ingredient. You're able to make a claim. Everything in this serum is at clinically tested levels of efficacy. So no point, multiple zeros of action. And we have over 25 active ingredients in here, including our highest concentration of cell vitae. And so, in a standard routine, you might need 3, 4 different serums, 5 serums to get the same effect. We blended it together with our long term ingredient and our short term powerhouse ingredients in a format that's also nice to feel on your skin.
Yeah, I can confirm because I've used it and it feels great. I am very curious what the how you see a product like I think the products that most people know in like layman's like me that we know is retinol for aging. I'm curious how that fits alongside your products. Do you see your products as like a replacement for that? Is it something that like they would stand next to each other or are they like in totally different lanes?
Yeah, great question. So I mentioned this idea of maximalist effect, minimalist routine, and that comes to play in a couple different ways, especially when it comes to comparing your current routine or what's on the market. So top of that list is maximalism and benefits. So it's going to be more than just redness reducing, more than just wrinkles, more than just hydration, all in one product, but it's also going to functionally replace products. So every single product in our line has at least 3 products that it can replace in your current routine. So, for example, with our cleanser, this is going to be, of course, your cleanser, but it also is your makeup remover and a hydrating mask all in one. So, none of this like saran wrap tight feeling. I know double cleansing is really popular right now. I mean, I know a lot of people where I'm like, it's a miracle if you wash your face once, especially if you've had a big day.
Yeah.
So, reducing steps while also from this product, you'll see, of course, your face feels clean, clears pores, it balances sebum. It's deeply, deeply hydrating. So it's able to replace not only multiple products, but multiple steps to get similar benefits. With our mist, same thing. Here we've got an essence, a toner, and a refreshing mist all in one step. So again, you don't have to have multiple products to fit these different solutions. And also from a benefits perspective is cooling, it's hydrating, it's brightening, it boosts radiance, it gives you that sort of instant glow. And last but not least is our what we call a serum, but translates to a serum plus a cream in one. And this is going to replace multiple serums in your routine in addition to your moisturizer. So when it comes to something like retinol, for example, what we do differently is address those visible concerns. Like retinol is a great example. The modality of retinol is very different from what we do, but the results are really comparable, right? Wrinkle reduction, evening, etc. The bigger challenge is we're all familiar with retinol and that irritation that comes with it. Sometimes using retinol is not a very fun process. It's inflammatory, right? And so that was always a big question to me too, with some of those more irritating ingredients where I'm like, okay, well, not only are we only solving like one piece of the puzzle, but we're actually creating a new problem, right? And so what our ingredient does differently is it addresses those same challenges that your familiar products like a retinol address, but in a way that's skin friendly, that's comfortable, that's anti-inflammatory. And so while there's no retinol in this ingredient or in this formula, the pathway that we're solving for is completely the same. So I always recommend you can actually replace your full routine with just these 3 steps. However, because it's anti-inflammatory, it's soothing, clinically tested, safe for sensitive skin. If you are a diehard retinol fan and you're not ready to give it up, this actually can be a really great partner for that routine as well, because it's not going to have any negative impacts like a retinol with an acid, and you can actually soothe some of that irritation that you have from some of those harsher ingredients.
That's really great to know because I've been kind of doing the skin cycling, using retinol one day and using your products the next day. So now I can start using them together. I want to talk about the future. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, do you see Cell Vitae being exclusive to East and West, or is this something that we're going to see in like products everywhere?
So, very happy to say that with developing something new comes patent availability. So, currently, our ingredient is patent pending exclusive to us. And once our patent sets in, it'll be exclusive to us for a while. So, if you want this long term, real root cause analysis that's going to give you this long term and short term benefit, we'll be your partner for many years to come.
That's great. I'm just curious, like from a business standpoint, do you want it to be exclusive to you forever? Or is this something that you want everyone to be able to use?
Yeah, from a business perspective, of course I love exclusivity. If you can only find it here, that's always going to be good news for me. My bigger hope for the industry is that the idea of root cause analysis really catches on.
Mm.
While I'd love the whole world to be, an East and West client, the reality is like we're trying to solve problems long term and we're trying to get much more holistic. So actually, my hope for skincare is that we get much more root cause focused and we address inflammation and this idea of underlying challenges. But it's actually my hope for like the larger wellness industry, right? We've heard of inflammation maybe in the dietary space, maybe in the medical space a little bit, but it would be great for all of these different sort of siloed industries to become much more in conversation, because we all know that skin is one piece of the puzzle, but how you eat affects your skin. Sometimes skin can kind of be, the canary in the coal mine where you see the effects of other things going on in your body visibly on your skin. And so my hope for the larger industry and adjacent industries is really that focus on root cause becomes central. And of course that you trust us with our ingredients.
So you right now you have three hero products, which is amazing. I think that's the best way to start a brand. Do you see long term you just have these three products and this is someone's whole routine, or do you see other products down the road in development?
Yeah, definitely hoping to expand in the future, but in a way that feels intentional and doesn't lose sight of the core issue, right? So I think like one of the biggest challenges on the market right now is you find a serum that's working for you and the communication is like, this is the best thing ever. We've got it. And then like 3 months later, a new serum launches like, no, 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 this is the best thing ever. This is the real solution. And then it creates this confusion where you're constantly relearning and redoing your routine. And that's where again that piece of like regular application, proper application starts to fall apart. So my goal is actually not to reinvent this routine. I'd love for these three to be your core for the long run. One way, but fun is a big part of it, right? How do we still keep it fresh? We love a sense of novelty. We actually have some really cool collaborations coming up to reinvent the products. We have travel sizes out now, so you're able to bring them into those different environments and daily use. But there's much more to skincare than just your face. So I'll give you a little wink wink hint there, but looking to expand to some other challenges that you might be facing with skin.
It's cool. I'm excited to see what else you come up with. What has surprised you most about building a prestige beauty brand? What has surprised you most about being a founder? Just something that's not what you expected when you started going down this journey.
Yeah, I think that there's been on a personal level, you again to refer back to the engineering front, I always knew that the tech piece was going to be challenging, right? If you're trying something new and you're researching, it's inherently difficult to do something new. The thing that was surprising to me was like the very personal nature of going out on, a new journey and how much doubt you have, and there's nothing to compare against to say, well, this was right and I'm going to copy paste it and then mine will be right. And so from a personal builder perspective, it is really challenging to, on the day to day, keep your vision focused, constantly fight when people agree with you, disagree with you, etc., but constantly keeping that core focus so that all of your researchers, your developers, your brand team can also focus on what they're doing, and making sure that, a healthy amount of questioning is always good, but making sure that you don't waver from that core.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to get into some rapid fire questions for you. As you're building this, what is one metric that you care about more than revenue?
Yeah, more than revenue, which is always going to be important for a brand. Really engagement across platforms, whether it's social or on our site, etc., because it's the most numerical approximation of like, do people like what you're putting out? And it's something you can get really great feedback on really quickly because again, we have great clinicals. We have data that our products work on a scientific level. But I wanna know, is it working for you in your day-to-day routine? Are you liking what you're seeing? Are you enjoying it? Are you traveling with it? Is what we're saying resonating with you? So those engagement numbers beyond just, of course, you wanna grow following, all of that, but, like, are we doing the right thing beyond just what's in the bottle? I have quantitative confidence in what's in the bottle, but as I said, there's more to it than just the formulas.
Yeah. What marketing channel are you focusing on the most? What's your number one marketing channel priority for this year?
Yeah, I would say, digitally, it's our social channels on Instagram, etc. But more than that, I would say it's in person and not losing touch with those one-on-one conversations. So more in-person opportunities to not only sell, but teach and learn from our community. Just because the products are done and on the market doesn't mean we're not done, doesn't mean we're done learning.
Are you building with retail in mind, or do you plan to stay direct to consumer?
Absolutely. Would love to move into retail. We know that accessibility goes beyond just online. And with products like these, it's always great to be really tactile. So, of course, looking to retail for the future. But in the meantime, you'll see us popping up in person in a couple different places.
What is your number one priority as the founder for 2026?
Absolutely. Sort of what I mentioned already, this idea of talking and listening and not just feeling like, sometimes it can be tempting to say, we reached the finish line, the products are done, we move on, but making sure that I always stay in this R&D mode, this learning mode, because the last thing you want to do is get stale and stop focusing on the client and what the core challenges are. So talking more, listening more, and being in person.
What is one word or phrase that you want to be synonymous with East and West?
I think the word bold is like always the focus for me, especially in this space. Minimalism has gotten such a focus. It's great, it has its moment, but I think that our clients are multifaceted. I want our products to be multifaceted. I want people to always expect more from us. Like bold,
Amazing.
always going to be the key.
I love that so much. Thank you for sharing your story. It's really incredible. What you've built so far is really impressive, and I can't wait to see where your brand goes. Where can everyone find you and East and West?
Yes, you can find us on our website and on Instagram. Both are eastonwest.com and at Easton West, spelled AESTONWEST. And you can find me at kateschneider.com or at Kate Schneider on Instagram, KAIT for Kate.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was so fun.